Hello students, this is Miss Mishu and this is my screencast on contracts. What is a contract? A contract is a legally enforceable agreement and it will contain the 6 required elements of a contract, which we will talk about a little bit later. Contracts you will most likely encounter in your life: an implied contract to buy goods or services, employment contracts, loan contracts, also called promissory note, contract to buy real estate, marriage contracts. So an implied contract is a contract that comes about from the actions of a party or of both parties, and this typically is something you've already entered into. When you go to the lunchroom and you buy something, you don't necessarily have to say anything. That's an implied contract. Other categories of contracts: express contract are those contract statements that may be oral or written. Bilateral contract is a contract that contains 2 promises. One party promises to do something in exchange for the other's promise to do something else. Most contracts are like this. A unilateral contract is a contract that contains a promise by only one person to do something, if and when the other party performs some act. So a good example of this would be a reward sign for a lost cat. That's a unilateral contract. Are oral agreements valid? Bob Goodman made a verbal agreement to buy a pocket calculator from Howard Herman for $35. When Herman delivered the calculator, Goodman refused to accept it, stating that he was not bound by his verbal agreement. Was Goodman correct? Why or why not? No. The oral agreement involving a small amount of money is enforceable if it meets all the other requirements of a valid contract. Now, as you know, to be safe, you probably should get something like that in writing, but it is a small amount of money. And as we stated before in this class, the law is not always black and white. It's all a matter of what is provable. Okay, so the 6 elements of a contract are an offer, which is a proposal by one party to another intended to create a legally binding agreement. I'll sell you my pen for $5, for example. An acceptance is the second party's unqualified willingness to go along with the first party's proposal. Okay, I accept your offer as is. Genuine agreement, an agreement that is true and genuine. A valid offer is met by a valid acceptance. Capacity, the legal ability to enter into a contract. Consideration, the exchange of benefits and detriments by the parties to a contract, money, property, or services, for example. And lastly, the 6th element is legality. Parties are not allowed to enforce contracts that involve illegal acts. So we're going to move forward to the requirements of an offer. It must be made seriously, it must be definite and certain, and it must be communicated to the offeree. So this little visual here shows the offerer will say down here, I'll pay you $50 an hour to edit my book on Mesoamerican sewing techniques. And the offeree says, I'll take the editing job. So it's unqualified acceptance. Requirements of an offer, the application of this. The Galaxy Research Center emailed an offer to the owners of Twin Pines, a farm in rural Arkansas. The email message stated, please consider this our offer to purchase between 9,000 and 11,000 acres of your 15,000-acre tract of farmland near Twin Pines, Arkansas. Our offering price is between $15,000 and $19,000 per acre. Please respond ASAP. Is this email message a legally effective offer? Why or why not? And it is not legally effective because the terms are too vague. Thus, it's missing one of the required elements of an offer. Requirements of acceptance. The party's unqualified willingness to go along with the first party's proposal. So that's the definition, the legal definition of acceptance. The acceptance must be unconditional and must follow the rules regarding the methods of acceptance. And the mirror image rule applies here, which means the terms stated in the acceptance must exactly mirror or match the terms of the offer. And a counteroffer is not an acceptance. It's a response to an offer in which the terms of the original offer are changed. The offerer now becomes the offeree. And here's a video on the mirror image rule.
Okay, so what is the mirror image rule? The mirror image rule is a concept that applies to the offer and acceptance of a contract. It states that the acceptance of a contract has to be under terms identical to the offer. So I offer to sell you this for $10. You have to say, yes, I will purchase that for $10, and that would be a valid acceptance because the acceptance is a mirror image of the offer. If you change anything at all, then it is a counteroffer. It is a rejection of my offer and a counteroffer because it is not a mirror image of my offer. Now, this rule applies for any offer that does not concern the sale of goods. There's a different rule in place for the sale of goods. If an offer between individuals to sell goods and neither individual is a merchant, right, or the individuals involved, if either individual is not a merchant. In that case, basically, any additional terms in an acceptance is thought of as a mere suggestion to be a part of the contract, but it's actually not a part of the contract. So I offer to sell you my coat for $10, and you say, okay, I'll purchase it for $10, but you got to give me a warranty against tears. Okay. Well, in that case, you've accepted. I send you the coat. You send me the money. That was a mere suggestion. But say, for example, we're merchants dealing in goods of this kind. So we both deal in coats. In that case, the rule changes. Your acceptance with additional terms is not merely a suggestion. It actually becomes a part of the contract unless several conditions are met. One is if it changes the terms materially of the contract, then it does not automatically become part of the contract. Okay, so in this case, a warranty probably would materially change the terms, so it wouldn't become part of the contract. Or if you expressly conditioned your acceptance upon these conditions, so yes, I'll pay you this if you give me a warranty, and then I send the coat. Okay, and then you send $10. Me sending the coat would signify that, yes, okay, in effect, I'm accepting the terms, somewhat like a counteroffer, but I'm accepting the terms of your acceptance and I'm complying. So then the warranty provision would become a part of the contract. And then another situation would be, say, for example, you require that I expressly reject these terms. That if I don't expressly reject them, then it becomes a part of the contract. And then I acknowledge that, and then I continue on. In that case, my failure to specifically reject your additional terms means that I've accepted them. Okay, so then again, they would become part of the contract. Now, that's a more complicated rule, and I suggest you read further into it, the material that we supply to fully understand that rule. But it is the important concept, the mailbox rule, and then the...
Okay, so that was a pretty good overview of the mirror image rule. So when does acceptance occur? The offerer cannot impose silence on the offeree as a means of acceptance. So in other words, the offerer cannot say, well, if I do not hear from you within 2 business days, then you have accepted. I will assume that you have accepted the offer. Silence cannot be imposed as acceptance. And acceptance that must be sent over long distance is effective when it is sent. So let's apply that. Victor Archer mailed an offer to Sally Miles. Sally mailed a properly addressed and stamped letter of acceptance 10 minutes before she received a revocation from Victor. Was the revocation effective? So when we revoke something, basically, you're pulling it back. You're taking it away. You're no longer offering it. So defend your position by citing which legal principle is involved and how it applies. So was the revocation effective? No. If an offer is accepted in the same manner of communication as it was made, the contract is legally binding as soon as acceptance is met. So as soon as acceptance was sent, it becomes valid. A genuine agreement is an agreement that is true and genuine. A valid offer is met by valid acceptance. What circumstances can you think of that would destroy the genuineness of an agreement? So fraud would definitely destroy that. That's a deliberate deception intended to serve an unfair and unlawful gain. Misrepresentation, when a person was involved in a contract negotiation, says something that is not true. It's misrepresented. Duress will destroy the genuineness of an agreement. Act of destroying someone's free will by force, threat of force, or bodily harm. This can be both physical and economic. And undue influence. These are agreements that are entered into when one person has a whole lot more power over another. Now, what is consideration? It is what one gives and receives in a contract. Okay? The benefits and detriments. So one person may offer to drive another person to work one morning, and the other might accept. Such an arrangement would have an offer, acceptance, and agreement, yet it's not a contract. If the offerer had a driver's license, owned his car to which had proper access, and had the appropriate mental capacity to make such an offer, the agreement would have capacity and legality, but still would not be a contract because there's no consideration. Only when some sort of payment or promise of payment flows from the passenger to the driver, thus consideration, would it be a contract. Okay, so the statute of frauds states that certain contracts must be in writing to be enforceable, to pay somebody else's debt, to pay the debts of a person who has died. Any contracts requiring more than 1 year to perform must be in writing. Contracts in consideration of marriage must be in writing. Contracts for the sale of goods over $500 must be in writing. Contracts to sell real estate must be in writing. Okay. So it's also important for you to understand the difference between a contract and invitations to negotiate. Advertisements in newspapers, price tags, and signs in store windows are treated by laws as invitations to negotiate, not genuine offers or contracts. So, sellers usually have limited merchandise to sell and cannot possibly sell an advertising product or an advertised product to everyone who sees an ad. That's a misspelled word, by the way, AD right there. For this reason, most advertisements in newspapers, magazines, and catalogs are not treated as offers, but rather as invitations to negotiate. If customers say they would like to buy an advertised item, they are actually making an offer to buy the item at the advertised price. The store owner is free to accept or reject the offer. Here is an application. Home Furniture Company advertised its water beds in a local newspaper. The newspaper mistakenly advertised the beds for $49 instead of $249. Must Home Furniture sell the beds at the advertised price? Defend your position by citing which legal principle is involved and how it applies. And the answer